Kevin Lawrence here, and today we're talking about the book, Your Oxygen Mask First, up here over my head, which is actually a long time ago since I published that book. Time flies. But we're going to talk about resilience, which is the piece that relates to mental health and our own resilience when things get challenging. And for a lot of us, that happens on a somewhat consistent basis. And just talking to someone who's newer into being a CEO yesterday, and they're just saying how they've burnt out a couple of times, and that's normal. It's part of the journey. So we're going to talk about resilience and tools to help us thrive better as we're on our journey. And sometimes we go a little too hard, and it kind of catches up with us. So the thing about all this stuff, like growth, being in a growing company, it's really exciting and it's super rewarding. And it's the growth looks like it kind of continually goes up to the right, and that's what we hope for. And for ourselves personally and the organizations, that kind of is the dream. But really, it's a whole bunch of little growth curves, and not everyone gets to play at the next level. Not everyone gets a chance to get through the one big challenging point and get to the next one. And what I want to share today is that we're trying to make sure this doesn't happen. And obviously, you can look at this as an organization overall or for yourself. Today, I'm most interested in ourselves personally, because that's where this can be really, really painful and potentially in some cases cost people their lives, which is really serious stuff. And we're obviously trying to avoid that. And in many ways, if we want to continue to grow as a leader in an organization, it's about learning to defy gravity, just like our companies are doing. And if you take your eye off the ball, lose focus too much, get overloaded too much, it can lead to less than ideal solutions. And ideally, we're trying to play the game to stay, with that green arrow. But if it's too much, it can be unsustainable. We can fall out of the sky like a plane going straight up. And if we're not careful, we can stagnate or decline. And sometimes, not even realize it until it really smacks us in the face. So the truth is no matter what, growth is hard and stressful. And that's part of the joy. I like challenging things. I like hard things. I like the reward I get from doing things that are difficult, but then can succeed at that. And the challenge is sometimes, we got clarity and we keep pushing through, but other times we end up with our head in the clouds, and that's where it gets dangerous. We kind of get lost. Sometimes we get overloaded. We can't see clearly. And that's where the hard part comes in, when the growth starts to shut us down on our abilities to thrive. And, my first experience happened when I was 24, and I was working in radio in Vancouver, radio station called CFOX, and I was thriving in a sales role and killing it. And I was part of a couple of charities, doing this charity work on the side and having a lot of fun as a 24-year-old would. So really enjoying life. And then I hit the wall hard, like seriously burnt out, didn't want to get out of bed. And it was tough. And as a salesperson, you need to put a lot of proactive energy into driving sales and building relationships. And I just didn't want to do it. So I talked to my boss. His name was Gord, great guy. And I go, Gord, what do I do? And, he gave me the best advice he knew. His advice was to get a mortgage. He said, the biggest one you can get. I'm like, okay. And he goes, because then you have to work. It gives you a reason to get up and do the hard things that you might not want to do. So I wasn't ready to buy a house, although I should have. If I did back then, it would have been probably a smart decision. But I went and got a line of credit, and I racked up my credit cards, kind of like having a mortgage, and it didn't make a difference. And it really got me in this path of being curious that when people burn out, how do you get back? And I eventually did. It took me a couple of years to recover. And I eventually did, and I've burnt myself out many times since, and I bounced fast. Now, I can see it and feel it coming, and I know how to manage it and actually get ahead of it so it doesn't really knock me down and take me out most of the time. I still have a personality sometimes that still runs straight into the wall because I think I can break through it, and it doesn't always work. But the point is, I've learned a lot about it from these experiences, and it happens to a lot of people. So the question I'd like to do, and we'll put this up in a poll, do you believe that stress is hurtful or helpful? Do you believe stress is hurtful or helpful? Think about that for a second, and I'll just get the polls opened here. 1 second. There we go. Do you believe stress is hurtful or helpful? Take a second. Let's see your thoughts. Hurtful or helpful? What do we got? Oh, I just did this last week for one of our clients down in the US for their organization, and they had a very different perspective than this group. Now, this is a group of more, CEOs and senior leaders, so that would that would make sense. Let's see, I'll close these. Excellent, great. So here is the results. 76% of you think that stress is helpful. Typically, we often see a 50-50, especially when we get more mid-level or frontline people. So 70% believe it's helpful, 24% hurtful. And, you know, you're all right, because the thing is, stress is very helpful to increase performance until it's too much and it sort of causes us to start melting down. And there's in some cases it is hurtful and some situations are helpful. So it can be either. We obviously would like it to be helpful, sorry. So we go look at our firm, just in terms of our philosophy is to success at work and thrive in life too. That's what we're about. We want, because we know when leaders are happy and thriving, it has a great radiating effect in their life and on their work. But to thrive in one and not the other is kind of tough. It doesn't sustain so much. And for me, and as I explained my own story of burnout, is that I was always curious why some high achievers thrive and while others, you know, burn out or fade away. What I've learned over the years is actually everybody burns out at some point. That's part of the game most of us are playing. The ones that fade away or their lives end earlier is a whole other thing that we'll talk about today. And there's all these great, amazing, talented people who chose to end their lives early, which is really unfortunate, which means they are obviously in a lot of excruciating pain. And unfortunately, we see this stuff in the boardroom too. And I don't like it. We've lost in one of the executive teams, we lost an executive team member to mental health, and a couple others have come close. So that's why I have become passionate about sharing this. And I'll give an example. There's a CFO that we worked with in a company. We hired him. He was an A player. He was exactly what the company needed. I think the company was just sub 100 million, and he was with the company up until 250. And he brought in everything we needed. He was a spectacular CFO, perfect for the job, all this stuff. And then he started getting wobbly. And this is during COVID. And what would happen is his team couldn't find him. And he would go MIA. Now, what happened? One of the executives had left the company. So he was, from the CFO role, he was also overseeing another executive function in the company, which is a lot of work. But he just started to disappear. And then because they were working remotely, it was really strange. And then the IT people started to track him down, and he was in another country, not in North America. And for whatever reason, he was constantly in this other country. And it was really, really weird. I remember being on calls with him, and I called the CEO after and I go, I think he was drunk, because he had having that slurring of the words, that it wasn't the tired slur. It was like the alcohol slur. So long story short, the CEO finally had to have a conversation with him because his performance was atrocious and we were concerned about him. He's a good guy. Well, it turns out his son was having some serious, serious issues, which was putting a lot of pressure on his marriage. So he had a battle on two major fronts. And we didn't know about this and then he's given this whole other portfolio to run in the company. So he completely imploded. We finally got to the point where he had burnt bridges very badly. We told him to take a couple months off so he could recover and focus on his rehabilitation, work with a counselor, etc. And at some point, he just needed to go because he was never going to rebuild the trust with the team. And thankfully, he chose to go to another company. And I talked to him recently, and he's doing way better now. But here is an A player, thriving, suitable for the role. And if any one of those things had happened, he probably would have been okay. But it's like 3 strikes and you're out. Too much work, personal problem with your son, personal problem with your wife. That's a tough go. And to this day, this guy still have a lot of admiration for this person. He just went through a horrible, horrible period. And thankfully, he's back on his feet now. And, you know, we've worked all around the world and seen this all around the world. And by the way, this is our team. This is a picture from one of our retreats. And our advisors that do strategy, and everyone on our team learns about mental health. Our core business is driving strategy and coaching CEOs. And the reality is we've had to learn about mental health because all of us high-strung, high performers tend to be a little bit more likely than typical to burn out and have mental health challenges at times. It's the rest of our team. So the reality, that's what we do is for CEO growth and then driving growth strategy through getting aces in the key seats, strong people driving in their roles. The 3 big moves this is from my new book, and this is around the strategy, and then 60-second insights, which is just awesome financial reporting. But we do that. That's the day job. This is a little bit different. And we're going to talk about the people piece here. And so there's a handout which we'll place into the chat. right now. And if the chat is disabled, then we'll just make sure we send it to all of you after. So if we're not able to share it with you, we'll do that afterwards. And it'll just give you these handouts that you can look at to understand some of these key slides. And we're going to start with a piece around resilience. And I believe in sustainable resilience. I believe it's possible, and I believe you got to work for it. At a higher level of play and a higher level of business, it just doesn't happen naturally and organically. And so the gravity of growth that we're fighting is this example of the right amount of stress and the right amount of performance. Across the bottom is the amount of stress. Across the up and down is performance. And right in the middle is a sweet spot. But if you don't have enough stress, you're in that bored zone or that slightly engaged zone, there's not enough stress to get the maximum performance. And for athletes, people like ourselves in business, that sweet spot is where there's quite a bit of stress. Now, and that's where we thrive. And obviously, we can't control staying there all the time. When we go past it, we start to burn out. Now, if we're aware and we start to take a little bit better care of ourselves, we can slide back up into the sweet spot. Unfortunately, when we keep going past burnout and we keep pushing through, because that's our nature, we're more likely to end up in that meltdown stage. And the people that end up having suicidal thoughts and taking their lives, they go past that and they don't get their way back. And what I want you to get today is that you can always get back to your sweet spot. Always, 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 always. And you'll just likely need some help and some tools to get there. There's this thing called the mental health continuum that the mental health associations of the world have developed that fits right into this model where your mental health goes from green to yellow to orange to red. And it corresponds to this, and I'll share that. So it's like you to think about where you are today on this mental health continuum. And, if you're over on the right-hand side of the quadrant, I want you to pay serious attention to some of the stuff that we talk about later. If you're on the left-hand side, you probably need to find a way to take on something more challenging in what you're doing. So the truth of this all is that all of us are one or two life events away from developing a mental health issue. Like, as in, I don't care who you are, how strong you are, how smart you are, how experienced you are, you end up in that situation where that CFO was, you too will be struggling mentally. It's predictable. It's like mathematics. It's not because of genetics or anything. There are genetic issues that are connected to mental health. I'm just talking about the stress pushing you over the edge. And I'm going to talk about suicide just for a second, not in a horrible way or horrific way. If you're uncomfortable, just, it's okay, step away. I don't think you will be, but I'm just giving you a warning just in case. So mental health continuum is this brilliant, simple tool that basically helps you to self-identify where you are and whether you're green through red. And it looks at your mood and your attitude and your behavior and your body and your addictions. And so the model, which will be in the handout that we'll share with you, is that when you're in the green zone, all your stuff's good. Your mood's in a normal range. Your cognition is normal. Your sleep is normal, like whatever your normal is. And your coping mechanisms, which everybody has, is, whether it's alcohol use, gambling, shopping, cleaning, who knows what it is, everyone's got theirs, is in a normal range. And it's like if you had sprained your ankle and when you slip into orange. So now you've got like a bandage on, it's like your ankle's it's bandaged up and you might have some crutches and your brain has sort of shifted like it's sprained. And you might be more irritable and, your cognition might be affected a bit. Your energy might be affected. And your addiction, whatever it is coming up. It's almost like the people that at a bad day would say, okay, I think I need a glass of wine. Or instead of having one, they'd have two. Or if they always have two, maybe they're having four. And so whatever that happens to be, it's getting a little bit rough. And then when you go from yellow to orange, it's like you broke your ankle. You have a cast. You may have a pin in your leg, and you're probably going to need physio. And this is when your brain is in help and needs some help. This is where you start to need proper medical. If you sprain it, you can put a bandage on yourself. If you break it, you go to a doctor. And so this is where you have angry outbursts, more negative. Your focus is affected. Your sleep is becoming problematic. You're withdrawing socially, and your addictions are full bore, like they're kicking in. If you're a one drink of wine per night person, you might be up to a bottle per night, or you might be supplementing with some tequila or who knows what, right? Like the coping mechanisms are working harder. And this is where you need to start getting help. And the red zone, where you slip into the mentally ill, is like you've been in a car crash, you have multiple broken bones, you need surgery, and you're going to be in the hospital for a few days, and then you need full recovery. You're obviously under the care of a doctor. And in the red zone, there's all kinds of things that start to show up that look like you're a bad person. You could be very aggressive or negative, hardcore road rage or whatever it happens to be. The worst part is when you're in the red zone, you lose faith in everything. But in particular, that you can get back to green. That's the dangerous part. You lose faith that you could get back to green. And that's where it's dangerous. And that's why in the red zone, if people stay there too long and they start creeping over to the far edge of the red zone, that's where people start contemplating taking their life. People have suicidal thoughts, and it becomes really, really, dangerous for them. And the addictions are out of control. There's some people that I know personally. At one point, they were out drinking every night at a local bar, and many of the nights, so they didn't drink and drive those nights. They would sleep in their car in the parking lot. These are professionals. These are professional people with professional jobs, but alcohol owned them. And then that alcohol wasn't enough. So then they started supplementing it with some pretty hardcore drugs on top of it before they finally got help with it. Truth is, they were just dealing with some bad stuff, and their normal coping wouldn't work, and has layered it on and on and on and on. So it's serious stuff. And I'll give you an example. A mental health expert having some serious road rage. This is going back in COVID. And the short version of the story is this mental health expert was going up to a spa in a city called Osoyoos, which is a relaxing resort town, almost like in the Palm Springs of Canada. And as they're going up, there's this beautiful, fun, windy road to drive, and they love to drive. But there's this car in front of them, like going incredibly slow. So they were actually charging at the car like a bull, slamming on the brakes, stopping, backing off, and charging again, with hope that it would motivate the person to get out of the way so they could drive fast and enjoy the windy road. Absolutely insane, absolutely unacceptable. And unfortunately, the truth of the story is that was me. Like, I know this stuff. I teach this stuff. I didn't realize I was in the red zone. I was fully in the red zone. I almost got in a fight with a restaurant manager. Like, there was stuff popping off everywhere. And that time, it wasn't even until I lied down from my massage at the spa that it hit me like, what is wrong with me? And again, I should know better, and I don't. And I'm just as susceptible as everybody else. So once I knew I was in the red zone, worked with my counselor, did a bunch of different things, and got myself back to a way better place and back to the green zone. And I've done that many, many, many times in my life. So just because you know it doesn't mean it still can't happen. Just like a doctor, it can still happen. Doctors can still break their legs, and doctors can still break multiple bones. They just need experts to help them. So these are all of the symptoms that I actually had during that time. Overinsubordination, all of these things were happening. And by the way, like my alcohol consumption went up dramatically during that time. And my sleep was a mess. So it happens, and there's a path back. So the solution to all of this stuff, and is there's something called mental health first aid. And we know first aid for lots of other things, but mental health first aid is called algae. And we can also share this in a follow-up note. But it's basically assess for risk of suicide or harm. The first thing when you see someone in a mess is ask, are you having thoughts of hurting yourself? If so, call 911, get them to an emergency, get them to a doctor, get help now, because they're in obviously a really, really bad, dangerous place. No different than if they broke multiple bones. And then the rest is listen to them, give reassurance and information, which is like this mental health continuum. Hey, this might be something, and you can get back to green. Let's look at it. And then E is the most important. Get to a psychologist or counselor. We aren't capable. This is, if I broke a bone, you're going to send me to a doctor. You're not going to try to fix it. Friends and family are often dangerous, not helpful in this, except for if they get them to a psychologist or counselor, which I'll share more in a minute. In the US, they have something called 988, which is a suicide prevention line. You just text it on your phone and you can get help immediately. Type in mental health hotline, suicide hotline in almost any city, anywhere in the world, and there's free resources to help. Always there. People that know how to help people when they're in horrible places. And most companies have employee assistance programs in their benefits. If they have benefits for their companies, most have it. And most will have it access to free support. And these people are good. That's what they do for a living. Problem is, people don't want to talk to us about it. People are afraid of blowback or discrimination against them if they talk about having a mental health issue. And that's why I talk about this. If you realize it happens to everybody, period, and then getting help makes you better, how do we get it so that people can talk about the fact they broke their leg as easily as they could if they broke their brain and need to recover? and it's hard. So I want to share a quick story of two CEOs who almost didn't make it. And they're both stories on our site, and we will put the links in the follow-up email to you. One is generic, the other is open. Michael is a guy down on the right in the picture where he did a full video interview to explain his experience. If you've got somebody going through a really, really hard time, they should listen to Michael's video. He is so open and transparent and honest, and I'm forever grateful for him for sharing his story. And the root of his story, in simple terms, he's an entrepreneur that built a company over 17 years. He got to a point where things were a bit bumpy in the business. He had some disagreements with some of his shareholders, and he was going to lose everything. His business, his house, every asset he had was going to get wiped out and no longer have the opportunity to run his company. He called me and we talked about it, and I met him socially. He called me and said, hey, I'd love to chat to you. He's talking to me about the business. And I'm like, I'm listening to the story and go, this guy's got to be devastated. So I said, hey, how are you? He's like, yeah, I'm fine. No, seriously. Like, how are you doing? This is a lot. And he stops and he's like, yeah, it's actually pretty tough. I said, I bet. We talked for a second. And I said, thankfully, I'm educated on this. I said, hey, are you having any thoughts of hurting yourself or suicide? And he's like, yeah. I said, okay. And then, change the whole conversation and change the conversation to, what do we do to get you support you need? And the reality is he was, he's going bankrupt. He couldn't afford to hire me. So I said to him, I'll make you a deal. Let's have a chat every week because I want to help you through this. And in the end, you do something to help other people and pay it forward, which he's writing a book about this now. He did that interview. That's kind of his, because he wants to help other people. Here's the kicker. Like, here is the real hard part of Michael's story. He's part of a CEO forum with a bunch of other CEOs where they check in regularly. He was in a men's group as part of his church. He had lots of friends and he had lots of family. But nobody was asking him how he was doing. I was the first person to ask him. And I'm not trying to take credit for it. I'm just sharing a fact. Here's what he said. He's got his stoic Eastern European, I think German background. And he's used to like, everything's fine. And like a lot of people saying everything's fine, everything's fine. So he wasn't really letting people see how bad it was. And so people didn't see that they needed to step in and see if he needed some help. But he was surrounded by help and resources. But the way he was showing up, because like all of us, he's proud and doesn't want to admit that things are a mess. People didn't think to ask him how he was doing. So once we got him on a program. I think he was seeing a counselor a couple times a week. We came up with a whole plan driven by a lot to do with his counselor. And then he and I checking in and troubleshooting some of the business stuff. In the end, it turned out okay. It wasn't a perfect outcome, but he got an okay outcome and is able to move on and still be here. One of the most important things is I had him speak to the other CEO that had been through it that I coached in the past. And they had a great conversation about what they would do that would really, what the other person did that helped them who went through a similar thing. And it was a great support for Michael to get that advice from the other person. Obviously, the other person was happy to share their perspectives. And I'll tell you one of the things, and what they found is that one of the techniques that helped the most that Michael got from that conversation was starting the day with gratitude. And it sounds fluffy and blah, 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 but it works. Because what they found is when they would wake up in horror and terror. So they take some time when they first woke up just to think about all the things they're grateful for and get grounded in that. And it was a difference maker. Now, the counselors worked with them both on lots of other things and that would have helped. That was one of the things that Michael shared. Anyway, so we'll put that in a follow-up email to you about that. But he's a high-performing, high-strung entrepreneur, done lots of things, been very successful, great charity and contribution to it, all kinds of great things that we all want to do. And it still almost got him. And that's really, really terrifying stuff. So I'm just wanting to break the stigma on this stuff and make it normal that when our brain breaks, that we get help, just like when our leg breaks or ankle breaks. It's just normal. It's part of the ride. So another simple story, a product manager. When I was working in the Middle East, I did a lot of work in Dubai for years. And we had someone who was running a massive, big project, which I just got an update on, and it's going through the roof. It's spectacular, like a massive commercial success, massive. But it was so disruptive in the business, it was creating a lot of friction. Long story short, and this guy was an A+ player, creating hundreds of millions of dollars of value for the organization, doing all the right things. Although it was a hard change to drive. At one point, he just started yelling and screaming, and he stood up in a meeting of 25 people around a boardroom table and just lost his mind on everyone. Like, it all just came out. And imagine when you're angry and frustrated, having an unfiltered version of everything come out. And that's what it was. And he's way smarter than that, but he cracked. He cracked. The pressure got to him, and he had good intentions and good desires. And we had to work on a program for him he was totally in the red zone, to get him back into the green zone, which he did. It took a bit of time. And the same person, who is an amazing high performer, even, we found out afterwards, he was having some very physical things happening in his body as a result of all the stress he was under. Like, it was full red zone meltdown that he had. And like, this is the kind of guy that if you could hire him and you could get him for a base of $1 million a year and $1 million in bonus, I would say hire him in a second, if indeed that fit your business model, what you needed. But he is an insanely amazing executive. The root of it all is that, sometimes people just need to be able to talk about this stuff in a safe space. And that's why I'm trying to share this, so you have resources and tools. But people need to talk about it. And it's less likely to happen in the office. Often you need to go for a walk or get out of the regular day-to-day to get the stuff on the table if somebody's struggling. So what's the mistake that we make? And we all make a lot of mistakes when it comes to this. I used to make a ton. That's how I learned about it. Someone called me out on it when I was very inappropriate in my opinions on some of the stuff. But generally, this is the mistake. We have good intentions of helping and supporting our friends and family, and we'll share stuff like this. And it might be out of a good intent to uplift or help, but it generally is very, very misguided. And really, you're blaming them. They're going to feel shamed. They're going to feel judged, and they're not going to feel heard and seen and all this stuff. It generally makes it worse. The main support you could do for someone is to empathize with them, and then follow the algae model and get them professional help. That's it. Empathize, get help. And if they're at risk, get to an emergency or ER or a suicide hotline right now. And if we look at all of this for us to maintain this, and that's why the oxygen mask first. You got to take really good care of ourselves so we can be great for other people. Tina, who's the CEO of T&T Supermarkets and worked 3 years ago, and she called it, you have to continually develop and increase your professional stamina. You got to make yourself stronger. And then you also need other resources and backup plans when it doesn't work. So that's what this book is about the habits to defy gravity, the gravity of growth, the gravity of stress, so we can keep thriving. And that's why there's a section on mental health and a section on resilience is one of the 17 chapters. And so the book breaks down into 4 categories: your energy, your clarity, your team, and your growth. And obviously it's written for leaders like ourselves. And in all of these, there's sub-points within it, but really those 4 categories. So we've talked about mental health already. And the key is that algae model and the mental health continuum. And we're going to talk today about resilience and how do you double your resilience so you can handle more stress and be more able to have a bigger, more enduring sweet spot. And you still might need some help at times. There's oxygenassessment.com if you want to assess yourself on the 17 habits. We'll put a link in the follow-up email out to you as well, or if you want to get a sense of where you're at. And on our site, there's endless free resources. There's hundreds of articles. There's case studies. Another one of our clients down in the US, we just did a case study recently on his business improvement. 160 podcasts from podcasts I did for 3 years. That was my COVID project. And then masterclasses and interviews, like where this will end up posted in the end. This is Chris Marsal. This is talking about hiring. Salim Ismail about disruptive innovation, and lots of others. And then a video for each of the chapters of your oxygen mask first. All that stuff's on there. We'll send a link. And we'll also send you a link if you want to. If you don't already have a copy of the audiobook and a workbook, we're happy to give that to you and for you to share it. This kind of stuff I'm happy to share as widely as possible. So that'll all be in your follow-up note. So let's get into your energy and resilience. So the idea is about doubling your resilience or doubling the amount of stress and pressure you can handle. And it's, really how good are you at making time for things that build and maintain your resilience, both for your body, your mind, and your spirit. And that's easier said than done. And generally, in good times, people are generally pretty good at this. Unfortunately, we notice is in hard times, when things get rough, people stop doing these things, and then they almost double or accelerate the speed of the nosedive into the ground. And that's obviously dangerous. We can avoid our resilience for a few days, But if we're not completely continually charging our batteries, just like if you have an electric car, if you don't keep plugging it in, it's going to run out of juice. And we are the same. And unfortunately, we try to override kind of a law of physics, and it gets us. And, there's a quote from a book, but there's no in between with leadership. Either it slowly destroys your life or it forces you to get stronger. And that's why I love it. It's hard. And it gives us reasons and ways to get better and better and become a better version of ourselves. And for me, you need to be consciously selfless to be sustainably generous. That's the hard part. We got to be fully charged up so we can help other people the best we can. It does not work otherwise. And by the way, the highest performing, enduring leaders do it. They may not advertise it or promote it as much. They might do it quietly, but almost all the high performing, enduring leaders have a bunch of habits they do to take good care of themselves. They have to, just like an elite athlete would. So this whole thing of work-life balance, and I think it's a joke. I think it's flawed. It's a sweet concept. First of all, it would be boring, but it's actually a flawed concept because in the middle is this thing called self. You. And yes, you do the work and you do the life, but you're the energy source for both. You're like the battery that powers both of those things. So sure, balancing work-life, but what happens to people like us is that we get depleted, our battery gets drained, and then we become no good in either, like in all of those stories that we talked about. And under pressure, we will compromise on ourselves and give that up to the point where there's nothing left for us and we're just going to get depleted. Again, like mathematics. And that's why we get ourselves into trouble. The situations take all the resources, there's nothing left for us, and then we start to shrivel up. And I think the best way you got to look at it, whether it's 10 or 20% of your best energy, you need to dedicate things to yourself continually and put yourself first, and then continue to do great work on both of those sides. If we self-sacrifice too much of the martyr, we're in deep trouble. And it generally blows back in time. You can do it for a short period of time, but not a long time. And so we have this thing called resilience rituals in the book, and it'll be also in the handout. And just figure out what are these things that you do for your body that gives you energy, like energy, nutrition, exercise, whatever it is for you. What do you do for your mind so you're calm and focused and grounded and have faith? And what do you do for your spirit so you're inspired? And, as I say, it sounds a bit funny, but so you feel kind of sparkly inside. So you're inspired and feel good and radiate great things into the world. So body, mind, and spirit. Now, when I said spirits, I didn't say spirits, I said spirit. Spirits are dangerous. And I like a good cocktail like nobody else. The challenge is it's also one of those dangerous coping mechanisms that can get you in a lot of trouble. I had a great conversation with a CEO yesterday that's been in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, for 30 years and is a big supporter and helping out with AA and Al-Anon and things like that. It's a powerful program for people where alcohol owns them. Because when alcohol owns you, that's a whole different game. So spirits might be a passion. It's fine. It's just something to keep aware of because it can sneak up on you and start to own you. And it might be reading your religious text or reading a book, whatever. Everyone's different. But we all have these things that when we do them, we get charged up and we feel good and it brings life and energy, and everyone's got different things and it doesn't matter. And it might be playing hockey or watching hockey. It doesn't matter. But there's things that charge you up and inspire you and you feel great. Lots and lots of different examples of what those things are. And this is Angela, one of the CEOs who worked with for more than a decade. She loves to cook with her family. Her company is the Little Potato Company. That's one of the things that they like to do. For me, I love dinners with friends. And generally, if we're cooking together, even better. Like that's the ultimate for me, actually. And writing is something for me, and journaling that helps me amazingly. This is like surfing at night on a lake, which we do up in the Okanagan every summer. And I don't know. I love it. It's great. Music, sun. This is my son. I was talking to him before this because we're going back up, but this is him here. He's now like 6 feet. He's not a little kid anymore, but that's when he got his race license. But cars and cars and sports cars. And we were just laughing this morning about some time when we were up there at the track racing go-karts and creating damage. But we had some pictures, amazing memory. So motorsports is something that I get a kick out of. Doesn't matter what it is. Point of it is that if you put yourself last, you're going to end up coming in last sooner or later. And you got to figure out these things that energize you and really bring the best out of you, whatever they happen to be. And so here's my list. Working out with a trainer 3 times a week, 6 a.m. or getting out for a good walk. Like today I was out for a walk at 5:45. you know, just getting fresh air, and I love it. Other activities like biking or somehow moving outside, it does it for me. For my mind, journaling and updating my to-do list. I know it sounds basic, updating a to-do list. Man, that's therapeutic for me. It's so powerful. And again, generally, I have too many things going on. I'm always prioritizing and reprioritizing. And then adventure with loved ones. You know, I just came back from a trip with my son. He was a F1 race fan, went to Miami to go see a car race and did a bunch of other stuff down there. But I love adventures and travel and things like that. And then pushing my limits, like motorsport type stuff. The other thing I've added that I realized now that I'm in my 50s, also real downtime. My life is incredibly busy, nonstop, generally 12 hours a day, every single day of the week. And I love it. But I also need downtime just to recover. Otherwise, it's a bit too much, which that's an addition. That wasn't there in my 30s. Maybe if I had that in my 30s, I wouldn't have burnt out so much. Point is, this is my list. So this will be on the handout we send you, but I'd like you just to think for a minute, you know, what are your resilience rituals? What are those not, and you might already do them. It might be a keep doing list, or maybe you might add something to it. So what are the non-negotiables for you, for your body, for your mind, and for your spirit? Body, mind, and spirit. And you know what's interesting? We've got an executive that I work with in India. His is called Make the Grass Green. One of his resilience rituals for his mind and his spirit is he waters the grass manually every night, and he's trying to have the greenest grass in his development he lives in. That's his thing. Another guy, a crazy editor from one of the media outlets I used to work with, he's actually a guy that when they captured Saddam Hussein, he was there, and he actually went for a swim in Saddam Hussein's pool. That's his claim to fame. But he used to call it scotch and cigar time. He'd sit on his deck and have scotch and a cigar. Now, two things that may not be great for your health, but that's what worked for him in his mind. Some people it's gardening, some people it's cleaning, some people it's cooking. People have so many different things that work for them. Fact is, it just works. Now, obviously, there's a lot of talk these days also about sleep and getting enough sleep. That's something that I know I'm paying a lot of attention to, especially, and that's why I even have an Aura ring to help track and for me to pay attention to my sleep. So thinking about those things that matter most. And the challenge is, I've had people say, Kevin, hey, this is great. What you're saying is, you know, take better care of yourself, which generally means take more time. And my family's already upset because I'm working so much and not around enough. So you're going to say that I'm going to go back to my spouse and say, hey, I went to this great session. I need to be more selfish and spend more time doing things for me. And that's not going to fly. And I said, well, hey, that's a great point. So what we figured out, because I hadn't thought about it from that perspective, what we figured out is this simple, powerful thing that if you're, you know, in your relationship, figure out what your partner's resilience rituals are and find ways to support each other to make that happen, right? Likely there's some different things. How do you, so one for example, one executive, he likes to coach his daughter's soccer team, and his spouse, she wants to go to do yoga. So they try and coordinate it with the schedule so she can get her yoga in every week and he can always be at the soccer games and practices. So with whether it's your partner or with your family, figuring out those resilience rituals and then supporting each other to do it, now it becomes a supportive act versus a purely self-centered act, which we don't want to necessarily do. So I'd like you to do, and we can use the Q&A, if you can drop it in there, if you could, some examples of what's the single most important resilient ritual for you to sustain. What is the single most important resilience ritual for you to sustain? And we can try, we could try, I don't think the chat's still not working, I don't think. So if you can, drop it in there. Let's give you a second, and if it works, if not, we'll just move on, that's fine. So think about for you no matter what. We got one here, Charlene. So journaling every morning, it helps me to connect with me. Yeah, great. That is, for me, exercise and journaling in the morning sets everything else up. Someone else, cooking dinner every night. Like that would be an anti-resilience ritual for me, but for some people it works. Morning exercise and gratitude, yep. Let's get a few more in there. Again, there is no right or wrong. You know, one of my clients, for him, it was 2 martinis a day after work. He'd come back from work. At the end of the day, he'd have 2 martinis, and that was his ritual. He did call me when it hit 8 and said, I think I'm in trouble. A lot of people during COVID got really thrown. But he knew he had a problem when it became too many. Yeah, saying no occasionally. Saying no is a big deal. And it's really hard for some people, even for me. It's hard as well. Bruce, morning meditation and stretching. That's something I also hear a lot of people doing. And the stretching for me, again, now in my 50s, I need to. My body is like, if you don't stretch, I'm not going to cooperate with you. And that's great. One more here, Carol. Going for a walk in nature and gratitude to close the day positively. Yep. One of the things that I do regularly is morning and evening gratitude. Like basically my partner and I talk, what are you grateful for? What are you looking forward to? Those things all ground a positive, strong mindset. They're really simple things and they work. And I hear lots of people doing stuff like that. Awesome. So final thoughts for just to kind of leave it with, and I'll answer some questions at the end, and we'll have a bit of time to answer some questions. Growth is exciting and rewarding. This path that we're on is awesome. It's awesome to be part of companies that are going somewhere, and our own growth and how we are thriving, learning how to thrive in new circumstances is awesome. The challenge is if we don't continue to grow through some of these growth curves, we get left behind or don't get to the next level of whatever it is. And the ultimate growth of a leader is becoming a better person, like generally becoming a better human being through the challenges that you face. The mental health is the part we have to watch. That's where we got to play defense. And then when it starts to fade, we need to pay attention and get help. Like we all need a psychologist or a counselor to help us through when we get down into that orange and red zone. Watch the continuum. Watch when you get over on the right side, and then double activate your resilience rituals and help to get to the left. And those resilience rituals are a big piece of getting back into the green zone outside of processing whatever you're fighting with a counselor can be really helpful. And then the LG action plan, the root of it is though, get to a psychologist or counselor when you're in danger. That's the only help. And if we can scale, our companies will continue to grow. That's the exciting part. You know, the stress is a teacher. It's meant to be helpful and to help us thrive and realize you need to wake up and learn some new things in some cases, or get some help if it's just circumstances that are just too much. And, you know, instead of putting yourself last, how do you put yourself first with just some of your energy for your morning rituals or whatever it happens to be? And nail those resilience rituals and don't compromise. They are your secret, you know, you're equivalent to KFC's secret of 11 herbs and spices. This is our 11 things that make us thrive and make us amazing. And so this is a picture just to finish with. This is like, reminds me of my grandmother, who I wrote about in a book because she went back to the university at the age of 81 to study theology. She was a spirit, like this woman in this picture who's having a riot. And I'm always inspired by people who are thriving in their later years of life. And at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. How do we continue thrive and be the best version of ourselves as we go through these journeys so we learn and grow and become better, and then continue to thrive in our 80s and 90s and ideally over 100, and that those things didn't take us out, that the stress became an accelerant, and we learned more tools and capabilities, and we just live our lives, you know, loving it, enjoying it, and being able to do it for a really, really long time. So thank you for your participation today. For those of you that were able to, unfortunately the chat didn't work, but we'll get that figured out. And I'll gladly answer a few questions. If anyone has any questions I can answer around resilience, stress, mental health, our own growth, and I'll hang on for a few minutes. And for the rest of you, enjoy the rest of your day. We're actually done early. I aimed for 45 minutes. We're at 47, but we started a couple minutes late, now 48. So enjoy the rest of your day. And I will gladly answer questions for those of you who stick on.